Everyone expected the younger sister to beg for mercy. No one expected the emotionally controlled woman beside her to slap the most feared mafia boss in New York and bring an entire ballroom to silence. The charity gala inside the Veyron Grand Hotel was built for people who did not believe in consequences. Crystal chandeliers burned above a sea of black tuxedos, diamond gowns, private security, senators, billionaires, and men whose names never appeared on invitations but controlled half the city from behind velvet curtains. The room smelled of champagne, designer perfume, old money, and hidden danger. Every whispered deal carried the weight of an empire. Every smile looked polished enough to hide betrayal. Evelyn Carter stood near the edge of the ballroom in a simple midnight blue dress she had rented with money she should have saved for rent. At 26, she had learned how to make herself invisible. Her face was calm, her posture controlled, her breath steady even when her heart was pounding. She was not rich, not powerful, and not protected by any last name that mattered. But beside her stood Mia Carter, her 19-year-old sister, and that made Evelyn more dangerous than anyone in the room understood. Mia was the reason Evelyn had come. A junior scholarship intern for the gala's nonprofit board, Mia had been asked to help organize donor cards, smile at people who barely looked at her, and pretend she belonged among families who wore wealth like armor. Evelyn had promised herself they would leave early. No attention. No mistakes. No danger. Just one night survived. Then Mia backed into the wrong man. It happened near the private auction table, where a sealed envelope had just changed hands between a silver-haired councilman and a man with a black ring on his smallest finger. Mia turned too quickly with a tray of champagne flutes, and one glass tipped, spilling gold liquid across the sleeve of a tall man in a charcoal suit. The music continued for half a second before the air shifted. The man did not shout. He only looked down at Mia, and fear moved through the nearby guests like cold smoke. 2 security men stepped in immediately. They were not hotel guards. They were syndicate men, broad-shouldered, silent, trained to move without panic. One caught Mia by the wrist. The other blocked her escape. Mia's face went pale, her apology trapped behind trembling lips. She looked across the ballroom, searching for the only safe place she had ever known. Evelyn moved before fear could stop her. She crossed the marble floor with controlled steps, but inside her chest, every old survival instinct screamed. She knew men like this. Men who believed power gave them permission. Men who saw fear and called it respect. But Mia was shaking, and Evelyn had spent half her life becoming a shield. She was not a victim tonight. She was the line between her sister and danger. At the center of the private circle stood Adrian Moretti. He was 34, dressed in a black Tom Ford suit that looked less like fashion and more like command. His dark hair was swept back, his jaw clean and severe, his expression calm enough to terrify everyone watching. Adrian Moretti did not need to raise his voice. The city lowered itself for him. Politicians answered his calls. Judges avoided his name. Rival syndicates measured their war plans around his silence. He was not just a mafia boss. He was the king of an empire built on control, loyalty, and whispered fear. Evelyn stopped in front of him, close enough to feel the cold authority around him. One guard tightened his grip on Mia. That was all it took. Evelyn lifted her hand and slapped Adrian Moretti across the face. The sound cracked through the ballroom sharper than breaking glass. The string quartet stopped. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. Champagne glasses froze halfway to painted lips. Every guard reached toward hidden weapons, but Adrian raised one finger and the entire room obeyed. Mia stopped crying. Evelyn's breath caught. Her palm burned, but her eyes did not drop. She stood there, trembling only on the inside, facing a man who could erase her life with one quiet order. Adrian slowly turned his face back toward her. He should have been furious. He should have punished her. Instead, his dark eyes studied Evelyn with unsettling curiosity, as if he had not been insulted but awakened. For the first time that night, the most dangerous man in New York looked at someone not with control but fascination. And in the silence, everyone wondered why Adrian Moretti had not destroyed the woman who dared to touch the king. Long before Evelyn Carter stood beneath crystal chandeliers and looked a mafia king in the eye without lowering her gaze, she had already survived the kind of monsters that never needed weapons to leave permanent scars on the human soul. They arrived disguised as broken promises, whispered excuses, and empty reassurances that tomorrow would somehow be better. They taught her that fear could move quietly through a home, settling into the spaces where safety was supposed to exist. Brooklyn had never been gentle with dreamers. The Carter sisters grew up in a cramped apartment where winter winds slipped through aging windows and overdue notices piled beside unpaid utility bills. Yet even in hardship there had once been warmth. Evelyn remembered fragments of it sometimes. The smell of cinnamon drifting from the kitchen. Her mother's laughter echoing through narrow hallways. Mia chasing sunlight across faded carpets while believing the world was still a safe place. Then instability arrived and never truly left. Their father had been a man built from charm and unpredictability. Some days he carried grand plans about business ventures and brighter futures. Other days he disappeared without explanation, returning with apologies wrapped in promises he never intended to keep. Evelyn learned to study the rhythm of uncertainty before she learned algebra. She recognized tension hidden behind forced smiles. She noticed the way her mother held her breath whenever footsteps paused outside their apartment door. Fear became familiar. At 16, Evelyn no longer measured life through birthdays or school dances. She measured it through survival. She protected Mia from disappointment by turning broken explanations into bedtime stories. She became skilled at hiding truth beneath gentle reassurances. It wasn't lying. It was shielding. It was preserving whatever innocence Mia still possessed. Then one rainy October evening, their father walked away completely. No dramatic farewell followed. No tearful goodbye. One suitcase disappeared through the doorway, leaving silence behind. Mia waited near the window for weeks afterward, believing loyalty meant people eventually returned. Evelyn knew better. Betrayal had taught her otherwise. If abandonment fractured their world, illness shattered what remained of it. Their mother grew weaker beneath sterile hospital lights while medical bills multiplied faster than hope. College brochures collected dust on Evelyn's desk while she memorized medication schedules and insurance paperwork. Dreams of university campuses and independence quietly slipped away, replaced by double shifts and impossible responsibilities. When their mother finally closed her eyes for the last time, Evelyn felt something inside herself change forever. She stopped waiting to be rescued. She stopped believing someone stronger would appear and make everything right. She became stronger instead. At 18, while others chased freedom, Evelyn learned how to stretch grocery budgets, negotiate payment plans, and comfort a grieving younger sister through nightmares she never admitted haunted her too. She worked mornings at a cafe and evenings at a bookstore. Exhaustion settled beneath her skin, but she carried it with controlled grace. Because Mia needed stability. Because Mia deserved safety. Because Mia was hers to protect. The sisters evolved beyond family. They became each other's home. Mia celebrated every sacrifice Evelyn tried desperately to hide, though she never understood their full weight. She trusted Evelyn completely, believing her older sister could fix anything simply by standing beside her. That trust terrified Evelyn more than any hardship ever had. Losing Mia became her greatest weakness. It was the one fear she couldn't control. People mistook Evelyn's calm nature for emotional distance. They didn't understand that control had become survival. Every measured breath concealed heart-pounding anxiety. Every composed expression masked the instinct to run whenever danger approached. She wasn't cold. She was emotionally scarred. She had mastered hiding because panic never paid rent and grief never protected the people you loved. Then came the charity gala. Hours after the shocking silence surrounding Adrian Moretti, Evelyn noticed something had shifted inside Mia. The younger woman sat near their apartment window twisting nervous fingers together while rain whispered against the glass outside. For the first time in years, Mia looked genuinely afraid. When Evelyn gently pressed for answers, fragmented details emerged between uneven breaths. Before spilling champagne near powerful guests, Mia had accidentally entered the private auction corridor. There, hidden behind velvet curtains, she had witnessed an exchange involving sealed documents, whispered names, and influential men discussing an arrangement tied to rival syndicates. At first, Mia thought it meant nothing. Until she remembered the expressions on their faces. Until she recalled hearing Adrian Moretti's empire mentioned alongside another powerful family preparing for war. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Because her sister hadn't simply embarrassed dangerous people at a gala. Without realizing it, Mia Carter had witnessed a secret powerful enough to destroy empires, and powerful syndicates would do anything to ensure that secret never escaped into the light. The city feared Adrian Moretti because he destroyed enemies without mercy. But the few who truly knew him feared something far more dangerous than his power. They feared what happened when Adrian Moretti stopped seeing someone as an obligation and started seeing them as his responsibility. Because loyalty, once awakened inside a man like him, became absolute. Unshakable. Terrifying. New York whispered his name carefully. In luxury penthouses overlooking Manhattan's skyline, politicians lowered their voices whenever the Moretti syndicate entered conversation. Wall Street executives pretended not to recognize him at private galas, despite answering calls from people connected to his empire. Federal investigators built careers attempting to understand how one man could control shipping companies, elite security firms, investment groups, and international logistics networks without leaving fingerprints behind. Adrian Moretti had transformed organized crime into an empire dressed in tailored suits. At 34, he wasn't merely powerful. He was disciplined. Every aspect of his world functioned through control. Meetings started precisely on time. Agreements remained sacred. Loyalty was rewarded generously. Betrayal resulted in permanent exclusion from the life people once enjoyed under his protection. Adrian never needed dramatic displays to command obedience. His silence often carried more authority than another man's anger. People obeyed because chaos frightened them. Adrian offered order. But monsters were rarely born. They were created. Long before private jets and penthouse offices, Adrian had been a little boy growing up inside a household constantly preparing for war. He remembered whispered conversations ending abruptly when he entered rooms. He remembered his mother's hands brushing dark hair away from his forehead while promising that kindness wasn't weakness. He remembered learning that danger often arrived disguised as friendship. Then he remembered losing her. A betrayal between rival syndicates shattered whatever remained of childhood innocence. One careless act of disloyalty forced Adrian to understand grief before understanding adulthood. His mother's absence became an invisible scar shaping every decision afterward. Fear changed him. Not fear for himself. Fear of loving people deeply enough to lose them. He spent years constructing walls no one could climb. Emotional attachment became weakness. Dependence invited devastation. He learned to value distance because distance offered protection. If nobody stood close enough to matter, nobody possessed the power to destroy him. Yet beneath calculated restraint existed a rigid moral code few outsiders understood. Women remained untouchable. Children remained untouchable. Adrian refused to involve them in the darker corners of syndicate politics. His empire operated according to principles established through pain. He remembered the helplessness of being young while powerful people decided futures without consequence. He refused to become the kind of man responsible for repeating those tragedies. That contradiction fascinated people. He was a king ruling an empire built through fear, yet quietly preserving boundaries others ignored. The protector hidden beneath the monster remained invisible. Until Evelyn Carter disrupted everything. Back inside the privacy of his Manhattan penthouse, Adrian stood before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city glowing beneath midnight rain. Usually, evenings after public appearances followed predictable routines. Reports, meetings, strategic planning, controlled breathing, controlled thoughts. But tonight felt different. His attention drifted repeatedly toward one impossible memory. A woman standing between danger and her younger sister. A woman with trembling hands and steady eyes. A woman who had looked directly at him without surrendering. Evelyn Carter should have lowered her gaze. She should have apologized. She should have allowed fear to guide her choices. Instead, heart pounding beneath elegant composure, she had stepped forward and challenged the most powerful man in the room to protect someone she loved. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't foolish. She wasn't seeking attention. She had simply chosen Mia. What? The thought appeared unexpectedly. Adrian dismissed it immediately. Control demanded discipline. Curiosity was acceptable. Fascination wasn't. Yet memories of Evelyn returned with disturbing persistence. Her emotionally controlled expression. The protective instinct stronger than self-preservation. The fierce loyalty radiating from someone carrying invisible scars remarkably similar to his own. For the first time in years, Adrian wondered what kind of experiences transformed ordinary women into queens capable of standing before kings without fear consuming them. Outside, thunder rolled softly across Manhattan. Inside, Adrian exhaled slowly and turned away from the city lights. His trusted advisor waited near the office doorway without interruption. Years of service had taught him exactly when silence mattered. Adrian's voice remained calm, measured, controlled. But something unfamiliar lingered beneath the surface. Interest. Before sunrise, he ordered quietly, "I want everything. Information on Evelyn Carter. Her history. Her work. Her family. Her fears. Her loyalty. Every secret." Because Adrian Moretti had spent years mastering control over his empire. And for the first time in a very long while, a woman had entered his thoughts without permission. The slap did not place Evelyn in danger. What Mia accidentally witnessed transformed both sisters into prey. Somewhere beneath Manhattan's glittering skyline, powerful men had realized a frightened 19-year-old girl had seen something she never should have seen. And in a city ruled by whispered alliances and invisible wars, secrets were often considered more valuable than human lives. The first sign arrived disguised as coincidence. 2 mornings after the charity gala, Evelyn noticed the same black sedan parked across from their Brooklyn apartment building. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia born from exhaustion. Lack of sleep had a way of magnifying fear. Yet when she returned home after her shift at the cafe, the car remained there. The driver never stepped outside. He simply sat behind tinted windows as if waiting. Watching. Evelyn's breath slowed deliberately. Control. She had spent years mastering it. Inside the apartment, Mia tried to convince herself everything was normal. She attended classes, completed assignments, and forced laughter into conversations that no longer felt genuine. But her hands shook whenever unknown numbers appeared on her phone. Her eyes drifted toward windows as if expecting shadows to stare back. Heart pounding had become their new normal. The strange occurrences multiplied quietly. The elderly doorman downstairs casually mentioned unfamiliar men asking questions about the Carter sisters. Someone had accessed Mia's social media accounts before passwords mysteriously locked her out. Grocery deliveries appeared they had never ordered. One evening, Evelyn discovered fresh footprints outside their fire escape after a night of heavy rain. Fear settled inside their apartment like an unwanted guest. Mia finally confessed everything she remembered from the gala. The whispered names. The sealed documents. References to rival syndicates preparing strategic moves disguised as charitable investments. She hadn't understood the significance then. Now she understood enough. Someone wanted certainty that she would remain silent. Evelyn attempted the obvious solutions first. She visited the local police precinct carrying every detail she could remember. The officer behind the desk listened politely before explaining that parked cars and anonymous inquiries weren't crimes. Without concrete evidence, there was little they could do beyond filing reports destined to disappear beneath larger priorities. The law offered procedures. Fear demanded protection. Walking home beneath gray winter skies, Evelyn realized how terrifying helplessness truly felt. She wasn't afraid for herself. She had endured instability, abandonment, and loss before. But Mia was different. Mia was home. Mia was the one promise she had never broken. That night, the sisters argued quietly across their tiny kitchen table. Mia blamed herself for everything. Evelyn refused to allow guilt another victory. Neither admitted the truth lingering beneath every whispered conversation. They were hunted. Sleep became impossible. Every sound carried meaning. Elevator doors opening downstairs tightened Evelyn's chest. Footsteps outside their apartment forced both sisters into silence. The simple act of existing had transformed into waiting for something terrible to happen. Then Adrian Moretti appeared. Without warning. Without explanation. Evelyn returned from work to find him standing beside the black sedan that had haunted her thoughts for days. Manhattan's king looked entirely out of place against Brooklyn's cracked sidewalks and aging brick buildings. His charcoal coat moved gently in the cold breeze while passing strangers instinctively gave him space they couldn't explain. Power followed him naturally. Fear followed close behind. "You've been watched," he informed her calmly. No arrogance. No manipulation. Only certainty. Evelyn's protective instincts sharpened immediately. Every lesson life had taught her warned against trusting powerful men offering salvation. Kings always collected debts eventually. Empires rarely extended kindness without expectation. Yet Adrian's attention remained fixed on the apartment entrance above them. "The people searching for your sister won't stop," he continued. "You need somewhere safe." Safe. The word struck harder than fear. Because Evelyn couldn't remember the last time safety had truly existed. She wanted to refuse. She wanted to reject everything Adrian Moretti represented. But Mia's frightened expression flashed through her mind. Protect. She'll survive. Before Evelyn could answer, an unnatural silence settled across the street. The doorman suddenly abandoned his station. The elevator upstairs stopped moving. Somewhere inside the building, a door opened and closed too quickly. Adrian's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Control sharpened into alertness. His gaze lifted toward the apartment windows. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "we're out of time." High above them, inside the apartment that had sheltered 2 sisters through years of hardship, unfamiliar footsteps echoed through the hallway. And just as Evelyn's pulse thundered against her ribs, the Carter sisters' front door began to slowly open from the outside, moments before Adrian Moretti stepped through the building entrance. Evelyn feared the Mafia boss more than the men hunting her until she realized his fortress had become the safest place she had ever known. It was the kind of contradiction that should have terrified her. Because women like Evelyn Carter didn't trust kings who ruled empires built from whispers and power. Safe places weren't supposed to exist behind iron gates controlled by dangerous men. Yet somewhere between fear and exhaustion, certainty and doubt, the lines she had spent years drawing around her heart began to blur. The Moretti estate stood hidden beyond the northern edge of Manhattan like a secret the city had agreed never to acknowledge. The property stretched across several acres protected by towering stone walls, intricate security systems, and silent professionals whose watchful eyes missed nothing. From the outside, it resembled the private residence of old money. From the inside, it functioned like the beating heart of an empire. Evelyn noticed the details immediately. Biometric checkpoints disguised behind polished oak panels. Hallways lined with museum-quality artwork. Private elevators requiring coded authorization. Panic rooms concealed within elegant architecture. Luxury and danger existing side by side. Power had never looked so beautiful. Mia stepped inside cautiously at first, her gaze drifting across marble floors reflecting crystal chandeliers suspended above sweeping staircases. For someone who had grown up counting grocery budgets and overdue bills, the estate felt unreal. Yet what unsettled Evelyn most wasn't the wealth. Was the order. Everything moved with disciplined precision. Staff members carried themselves with quiet professionalism. Security teams communicated through subtle gestures rather than visible intimidation. There was no chaos. Only control. Adrian Moretti had built his empire around certainty. For the first few days, Evelyn remained emotionally guarded. She slept lightly, expecting betrayal to emerge beneath expensive smiles. She monitored every entrance, memorized exits, and instinctively positioned herself between Mia and unfamiliar faces. She trusted no one, especially Adrian. But Adrian never demanded trust. That disturbed her more than pressure would have. He simply arranged breakfast according to Mia's preferences after overhearing her mention favorite foods. He ensured Evelyn's favorite tea appeared without explanation in the estate kitchen. When Mia expressed anxiety about falling behind academically, tutors arrived discreetly without anyone drawing attention to their presence. Small gestures. Quiet acts. Protection offered without expectation. Fear slowly lost its sharp edges. Mia changed first. Weeks of uncertainty gradually disappeared from her expression. The constant tension left her shoulders. Laughter returned unexpectedly during movie nights organized by household staff. She resumed online classes from sunlit rooms overlooking winter gardens hidden within the estate grounds. Healing looked ordinary. Safe. Evelyn noticed everything. Especially Adrian. The King of New York remained frustratingly distant and impossibly attentive all at once. During dinner gatherings he rarely spoke unless necessary. Yet somehow he always noticed when Mia seemed overwhelmed or when Evelyn skipped meals due to stress. He protected without hovering. Observed without controlling. Listened without demanding. The contradiction fascinated her. Late at night, sleep often abandoned both of them. Evelyn wandered empty hallways wrapped in oversized cardigans while silence settled across the estate. More than once, she discovered Adrian standing before floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights beyond distant trees. No conversations followed. Only shared stillness. Two emotionally scarred people existing within the same quiet. Heart-pounding moments transformed into comfortable silences. Breath visible against cool midnight air drifting through partially open terraces. Neither acknowledged the growing awareness between them. Yet something shifted. Trust arrived gradually. Evelyn stopped checking every locked door twice before bed. Mia began referring to the estate as home by accident. Fear gave way to possibility. For the first time since childhood, Evelyn allowed herself to imagine what safety might feel like if it didn't disappear overnight. She had spent years being everyone's shield. Years surviving. Years believing protection depended solely on her strength. She was not a victim. She had become powerful. But perhaps queens weren't meant to carry kingdoms alone. Perhaps even protectors deserved protecting. One sleepless night, unable to quiet restless thoughts, Evelyn walked toward Mia's room intending to check whether her sister had fallen asleep after another difficult day. The hallway remained dim beneath soft lighting as rain whispered against distant windows. Then she stopped. At first, she thought exhaustion had distorted reality. But the figure seated quietly outside Mia's bedroom remained unmistakable. Adrian Moretti sat in silence near the doorway, suit jacket discarded beside him, reviewing reports beneath muted light while maintaining constant watch over the girl sleeping safely inside. No audience witnessed it. No recognition awaited him. The king of an empire had spent every night guarding Mia Carter's door himself. And suddenly, Evelyn realized the most dangerous man in New York had quietly become the safest place she had ever known. Just when Evelyn began believing in safety again, the sanctuary built to protect them became a battlefield. The cruelest betrayals rarely announced themselves with raised voices or dramatic warnings. They arrived quietly, hidden behind loyalty, waiting patiently inside the walls people trusted most. The Moretti estate had become predictable in ways Evelyn had never expected. Morning sunlight spilled across marble floors while Mia attended virtual classes from the library overlooking snow-covered gardens. Staff moved through hallways with practiced efficiency, and security teams maintained routines so disciplined they resembled clockwork. For the first time in years, Evelyn had started breathing without counting exits. That peace lasted exactly 12 days. It began with something almost insignificant. A housekeeper forgot Mia's dietary restrictions despite memorizing them weeks earlier. A security checkpoint experienced an unexplained technical delay. One of Adrian's trusted advisors canceled 2 meetings without explanation. Small inconsistencies surfaced throughout the estate like fractures beneath polished glass. Most people overlooked them. Adrian Moretti did not. Evelyn noticed the shift immediately. The calm king she had slowly begun trusting grew quieter. His movements sharpened. His attention narrowed. Conversations shortened into measured instructions whispered through discreet earpieces. The estate's atmosphere transformed from elegant sanctuary into something tighter. Controlled. Prepared. Danger had found its way home. Evelyn discovered Mia sitting in the music room one evening, fingers frozen above piano keys she no longer touched. Fear lingered inside her younger sister's eyes despite weeks of healing. What if they never stop looking for us? Mia finally asked. Evelyn wrapped protective arms around her shoulders. They will, she promised softly. But for the first time, certainty abandoned her. Outside, rain pressed against towering windows while shadows stretched across the estate grounds. Somewhere beneath that silence, betrayal had already crossed the gates. Adrian called an emergency meeting before midnight. Evelyn wasn't invited. Still, passing through the corridor outside his office, she caught fragments of conversation drifting through partially open doors. Internal compromise. Information leak. Movement from rival syndicates. Someone close had broken loyalty. The realization chilled her. Empires weren't destroyed by enemies outside their walls. They collapsed because someone inside chose betrayal. Hours later, alarms echoed through the estate. Not deafening. Controlled. Precise. Every hallway shifted into motion. Security teams redirected household staff. Hidden passageways opened behind decorative panels. Panic protocols activated with terrifying efficiency. Mia's face lost color instantly. Heart pounding, Evelyn grabbed her sister's hand. Fear threatened to overwhelm them both. But she had not survived abandonment, grief, and sacrifice only to surrender now. She was not a victim. She became powerful. Stay close, Evelyn whispered. The phrase had guided their entire lives. Stay close. Protect. Survive. As they moved through unfamiliar corridors beneath the estate, Evelyn witnessed another side of Adrian Moretti. Not the distant king. Not the sleepless guardian outside Mia's bedroom. This version carried authority sharp enough to silence panic itself. His voice remained level while issuing instructions. His presence steadied those around him. Fear existed but control ruled above it. Loyalty answered his command without hesitation. Until it didn't. One trusted member of Adrian's inner circle disappeared. Security routes were compromised. Someone had deliberately exposed Mia's location. The realization struck Evelyn harder than any threat. Betrayal hurt differently. It transformed certainty into suspicion. Safe places no longer felt safe. As evacuation plans shifted, confusion spread through the estate. Directions changed. Hallways once protected suddenly carried uncertainty. In the chaos, Evelyn became separated from Mia for one terrifying moment. One moment. That was all fear required. Panic clawed through her chest as unfamiliar footsteps approached from intersecting corridors. Every instinct screamed escape. Breath caught painfully in her throat. Then Adrian appeared. Close. Certain. Without hesitation, he stepped between Evelyn and the approaching danger. His dark eyes held something she had never seen before. Not strategy. Not discipline. Possession. What? The silent declaration existed not through words, but through unwavering intent. He looked toward Evelyn as if reminding himself she remained standing, as if losing control mattered less than losing her. The king and protector collided inside one man, and Evelyn finally understood why New York feared Adrian Moretti. Because his rage wasn't reckless. It was purposeful, focused, terrifying in its devotion. Moments later, hidden passageways guided them toward one final secured exit beneath the estate. Rain thundered above while emergency lights painted everything crimson. Mia clung to Evelyn's hand. Evelyn stayed close to Adrian. For one impossible heartbeat, hope returned. Then time slowed. A sharp sound shattered the corridor's rhythm. Adrian turned instantly. Evelyn felt herself pulled backward by powerful hands before realizing what had happened. Silence followed. Disbelief. The King of New York lowered his gaze toward the spreading stain darkening his white dress shirt. Adrian Moretti had stepped in front of Evelyn and taken the bullet meant for her. It is terrifying to fear a monster. It is even more dangerous to realize the monster would die to keep you safe. Because fear creates distance, but devotion destroys it. And once Evelyn Carter understood the truth hidden beneath Adrian Moretti's carefully controlled exterior, she discovered that the most frightening part wasn't his power. It was how deeply he had begun to care. The private medical wing beneath the Moretti estate existed in complete silence. Soft lighting replaced the cold harshness of traditional hospitals, while rain whispered against reinforced windows overlooking the winter gardens. The Empire continued moving outside those walls, but inside that room, time slowed into measured breaths and restless nights. Adrian Moretti had survived. Yet survival carried its own consequences. For the first time since Evelyn had met him, the king looked human. The immaculate control she had associated with him gave way to exhaustion hidden beneath closed eyes and sleepless recovery. The man who commanded politicians and controlled international negotiations now struggled with simple movements he stubbornly refused assistance with. He remained Adrian Moretti. Proud, controlled, unwilling to appear vulnerable. But vulnerability had arrived anyway. Evelyn never intended to stay by his side. She told herself Mia needed stability. She convinced herself gratitude required kindness. She insisted this was temporary. Yet each evening found her returning to his room, refilling untouched glasses of water, adjusting blankets that never stayed in place, leaving books near his bedside she suspected he would never read. Neither acknowledged the routine developing between them. No dramatic declarations interrupted the quiet. Only silent caregiving. The kind born from understanding suffering too intimately. Heart-pounding uncertainty followed Evelyn through those nights. She had spent years building walls designed to survive abandonment. Trust had always seemed reckless. Love appeared dangerous. Depending on anyone invited loss. But Adrian had stepped in front of danger without hesitation. Not because obligation demanded it. Because protecting her mattered. That truth unsettled her more than fear ever had. Across the estate, Mia noticed everything. Healing had restored brightness to her smile, but grief had sharpened her perception. One afternoon, seated beneath the library's towering windows, she watched Evelyn prepare tea exactly the way Adrian preferred before carrying it downstairs without realizing what she was doing. Mia smiled softly. The shield protecting everyone else had finally lowered her own defenses. Found family rarely arrived through grand gestures. It revealed itself through consistency. Through showing up. Through choosing each other repeatedly. Weeks passed and Adrian's strength gradually returned. Yet emotional distance became increasingly difficult to maintain. Midnight conversations evolved from practical updates into shared reflections spoken beneath muted lamplight. Evelyn spoke of sacrifice. Adrian spoke of responsibility. Neither named loneliness. Both recognized it. He confessed that power had never eliminated fear. It had simply changed its shape. Empires could be rebuilt. Wealth returned. Loyalty restored. But loss remained permanent. His greatest fear wasn't war. It wasn't betrayal. It was allowing someone close enough to matter. Because loving people handed fate another opportunity to punish him. Evelyn understood immediately. She had lived beneath that same fear since 16. Close enough to hear each other's breathing, they sat suspended between confession and silence. Two emotionally scarred survivors. Two protectors exhausted by carrying worlds alone. She was not a victim. She became powerful. And perhaps strength wasn't refusing help. Perhaps strength meant choosing trust despite understanding exactly how devastating loss could become. For the first time, Evelyn stopped viewing Adrian as a king ruling from above. She saw the boy who lost his mother. The man who guarded Mia's door every night. The protector terrified of failing those he loved. Without realizing it, fear transformed into loyalty. Safe stopped feeling temporary. Mine stopped sounding possessive. It became belonging. Then reality arrived to remind them that peace inside an empire rarely lasted. Federal investigators appeared at the estate unexpectedly carrying sealed files gathered from decades-old investigations. Their expressions held uncomfortable certainty as they requested a private audience with Adrian and Evelyn. Rain battered the windows while silence settled heavily across the room. Photographs emerged first. Old newspaper clippings followed. Financial records. Witness statements. Names. One name forced all oxygen from Evelyn's lungs. Her late father's. The investigators revealed that years before abandoning his family, Thomas Carter had unknowingly assisted the people responsible for a betrayal that altered Adrian Moretti's life forever. The same betrayal connected to his mother's death. The darkest tragedy of Adrian's childhood. Evelyn's pulse thundered inside her ears as she slowly turned toward Adrian. The man who had become her safe place stood motionless beside her. And for the first time since choosing trust, she wondered if love could survive the truth hidden inside their pasts. The woman who once slapped a mafia boss to save her sister now stood beside him, daring an entire syndicate to threaten her family. Fear had brought Evelyn Carter into Adrian Moretti's world. Loyalty had kept her there. Love, however, demanded something greater. It demanded choice. Because becoming a queen was never about inheriting power. It was about deciding who deserved your mercy when vengeance would have been easier. The truth about Thomas Carter settled over the Moretti estate like winter fog. Federal investigators had uncovered evidence proving Evelyn's father had unknowingly assisted the financial network responsible for the betrayal that ultimately led to Adrian's mother's death decades earlier. The revelation cracked open old wounds neither of them had asked to revisit. Evelyn carried guilt she didn't deserve. Adrian carried grief he had never escaped. For several days, silence replaced comfort. The sanctuary they had built together trembled beneath the weight of impossible history. Evelyn considered leaving more than once. She had spent her entire life cleaning up after choices made by the people who abandoned her. Perhaps this was no different. Perhaps protecting Mia meant walking away. But when she finally packed a suitcase, Mia stood in the doorway with tears brightening determined eyes. "We survived because we stayed together," she reminded her sister softly. "Don't let someone else's betrayal become yours." Those words changed everything. Evelyn realized she had been measuring herself against her father's failures her entire life. She was not him. She had never abandoned anyone. She had become powerful precisely because she chose loyalty when others chose escape. Meanwhile, Adrian faced a war far more dangerous than rival syndicates. The war inside himself. The king understood revenge. Revenge was simple. It followed rules. It demanded payment. Love complicated everything because love asked powerful men to forgive what their pain wanted to punish. For the first time since inheriting the Moretti Empire, Adrian stood before a choice he couldn't control through strategy. He could surrender to grief. Or choose the woman standing beside him. On the evening of the annual syndicate assembly, New York's most influential figures gathered beneath the vaulted ceilings of the Moretti Grand Hall. Leaders from legitimate corporations and hidden empires occupied seats beneath glittering chandeliers. Conversations unfolded through careful whispers while loyalty shifted like unseen currents beneath polished smiles. The atmosphere carried danger disguised as elegance. Everyone expected Adrian Moretti to arrive alone. Instead, he entered with Evelyn Carter at his side. The same woman who had once slapped him before an entire ballroom. The same woman outsiders still underestimated. But Evelyn no longer resembled the frightened sister hiding behind borrowed courage. She moved with quiet confidence wrapped in midnight silk. Her shoulders remained straight. Her gaze steady. The room watched her carefully, waiting for uncertainty. It never arrived. Heart pounding beneath composed grace, Evelyn stepped into the lion's den without lowering her head. Queens didn't inherit strength. They earned it. When murmurs questioning her place drifted through the assembly, Adrian remained silent. He didn't defend her. He didn't need to. Evelyn defended herself. With measured intelligence and unwavering dignity, she addressed concerns surrounding her family's connection to past betrayals. She acknowledged truth without surrendering identity. She refused shame for sins she had never committed. "I choose loyalty," she said. Every single day. The room fell silent. Respect wasn't granted through fear alone. It was earned through character. One by one, influential figures who had doubted her lowered their resistance. They recognized what Adrian had seen from the beginning. She protected. She endured. She belonged. What? The word echoed quietly through Adrian's heart. Not possession. Partnership. The king finally understood that power meant little without someone to share its burden. Mia's future was secured shortly afterward. Scholarships, protection, and opportunity stretched before her without fear dictating every choice. The little sister Evelyn had sacrificed everything for finally possessed freedom. Family had become their greatest strength. Fear transformed into devotion. Danger gave way to sanctuary. Adrian Moretti, ruler of an empire built through discipline and control, chose love over vengeance. He crossed the distance separating them and took Evelyn's hand before the entire assembly. No speeches followed. No dramatic declarations. Only certainty. The monster had chosen mercy. The protector had found home. The queen had claimed her place beside the king. Outside, Manhattan sparkled beneath winter stars while peace settled over the Moretti Empire for the first time in years. Then the envelope arrived. Sealed in black wax. No return address. No explanation. The hall grew quiet as Adrian broke the seal and unfolded its contents. A single photograph slipped into his hand. Evelyn's breath caught. Heart-pounding returned instantly. Because staring back from the image was a face Adrian had buried deep within memory. A woman connected to the darkest chapter of his past. A woman believed dead for over 20 years. And beneath the photograph, written in elegant handwriting, were 6 words that shattered the sanctuary they had fought to build. The dead have a way of returning.